Hey guys, how are you today? Welcome back to another live with my guest today, Amanda Catarzi. We have so much to talk about today. I am so excited. Let me put her on gallery view so y'all can see her. Welcome, Amanda.
Hello.
Amanda has such a great story. I can't wait for you to hear it. She was an MMA fighter. What? I remember the first time we talked, I was like, you were a fighter? Girl, like I want to go in the ring with you. No, I don't. I think you would probably do a hurting on me. You also are a survivor from human trafficking, which I'm really intrigued about. We've talked about it privately, but I'm excited for you to share that story so that we might be able to help others understand what that means and how someone can get through that. You also have a little bit of a relationship with alcohol, and we can touch on that, but we're really going to focus on the importance of sharing your story. So, welcome, Amanda. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be here and been like a little person in the group following and listening and watching everybody. So it's fun to
Yeah.
be on as a guest.
Yeah, thanks. And if anybody has any questions, please know, go ahead and put them in the comments. Hopefully I'll be able to see them. It's always funny when I go live through Zoom, I can't always see it, but hopefully I'll see it. But anyways, yeah. So why don't we start with, let's start all the way back. I mean, as far back as, remember, like give us a little bit of an idea of what your upbringing was like and what that was
Sure.
like, because you had a little bit of a different upbringing, if I remember,
Just
right?
a little bit.
Just a little
Yeah.
bit.
I was raised in this very religious occult, not occult, cult. So it was very conservative Christian cult. So I mostly tell people that I was raised Amish, but that's just so people can understand. But so I was basically raised in a cult where basically women were had no voice, we had no opinion, we were just there to create babies and clean the house.
Mm.
So it's important part of my story because it plays out into how I got into sex trafficking, and what happens to you as a child is so important to how you view the world moving forward, and being groomed basically in this cult to date older men, to not have a voice, to not have an opinion, to be submissive, really set me up for failure in my future. So I was raised in this cult, no TV, no music, no pants were allowed, no makeup was allowed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was crazy times. During that time, I was about 7 or 8. I was molested by one of my neighbors,
Mm.
and that was my first encounter with sexual abuse, with any sort of sex or anything like that. But because of the culture I was raised in, my word against the man's didn't carry much weight. So I wasn't heard, I wasn't seen. It was this secret that I just kept with me and felt shame and guilt around, because as a 7-year-old, it's really hard to understand that for a very long time. And
Oh,
it
wow.
definitely played out in the future as well.
I want to pause there just for a second and talk about it, because some people may not know this, that everything that happens to us as children up to the age of 5 or up to the age of 7, actually, we store in our subconscious brains as a factual belief.
Mhm.
So, what was happening with you, and I think this is important because you said it set me up for some failures coming forward, which we're about to hear.
Mhm.
So, I say this, and I asked Amanda to pause on her story there because I think it's really important that we are super hyper aware of how we speak and how we treat our children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews, especially between those ages before they're, born to age 7, that
Mhm.
everything that they hear and everything that they take in, they're taking that in as factual, as a belief. And that does set us up for future limiting beliefs and future devastation and future trauma. So it's really important that we pay attention to that. So here you are, you're at 7, you are in this situation with the
Mhm.
neighbor, you said.
Mhm.
And so already this is starting.
This is already starting, and actually, like, I don't usually tell this part, but his brother actually brought me home. So the neighbor's brother brought me home, and I was crying, and my dad answered the door, and I was kind of known as a tomboy, a little rambunctious. And dad opens the door and he goes, "What did she do? Whatever happened, she probably deserved it. having no idea what had just happened to me. So you talk about those beliefs being instilled in you. That was like, okay, I deserve this. What this happened to me, my dad said I deserve this, so I must have deserved it. So it set up that belief that I deserve to be violated. And that definitely carried forward in my future. So fast forward to 20 years old, moving to California, going to school on my own for the first time, having no idea who I am, having no opinions. I walked into a grocery store to buy groceries. I didn't even know what I liked to eat. And I had a meltdown in the grocery store because this was my first time having a choice for the first time in my life. And so just to give you an idea of how controlling that environment was. So when I got out of it, there were a lot of unknowns, and it took a while to discover myself. So I was in school, that went great, time of my life, being all rebellious, doing stuff that you do at school in a different state. And after school ended and I graduated after 3 years, I no longer had this enforced community that I had in school. So you have study groups, you have classes, and now I don't have those places where I have something in common. And my lack of social skills really played out. And then all my insecurities and all that trauma got to resurface in my life. And I started connecting with really toxic people. And that was a huge downfall. And I saw these people's expressing their emotions, expressing their horrible stories very vocally. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's completely different from the environment I was raised in, where we kept secrets. These people are just all out in the open, no shame, no nothing. And I thought it was healthy when really it was dysfunctional. But it still drew me in. And I ended up meeting my MMA family and started training with them. And I had a knack for knocking people out. So they just loved me and took me in and trained me up to be a fighter.
Wow. Wow. So a lot of that too, probably came from that you didn't have a whole lot of self-confidence, obviously. You were always brought up to believe that you weren't good enough, that you weren't to use your voice, that we were to keep small. And when we feel like we're kept small, we can't use our voice. And when we can't use our voice, this is when problems occur. And which is really, if for everybody in the group and knowing this week, this theme really is about sharing your story and having, the blog this week was your dirty little secret. And it could mean a number of things, right? And, my case, it was drinking and smoking. I mean, I was the biggest closet smoker. And plus I had my own childhood trauma, not quite like yours, but most of us have had some sort of trauma, and there's little T trauma and big T trauma. And what you went through is pretty much big T trauma. So at this point, you meet this group and now, they're feeling your insecurities, which is the easiest prey. And this is so important because human traffickers who are the ones who are preying on people. It doesn't matter that Amanda at this point was 20 years old. It matters that she was an easy prey. And they find those insecurities, and it's like hunting. It's almost hunting for someone. So you meet your MMA family, and then what happens?
Well, obviously fighting and drinking go hand in hand. So we would train all night and then we would drink for the rest of the night. Oh, Frankie. So we train all night, we drink all night, and then we get all beat up. So we drink some more to cover that physical pain, not to mention the emotional pains. And I started getting really close with my boxing coach, who, is going to get me a pro fight. He's going to sign me. He's going to get me in front of UFC, Dana White, all the good things. So he started making me all these promises. I really got something special. I started sharing my story with him, about stuff that happened to me, my background. So he knew how naive I was. He knew how hurt I was. And exactly like you said, he knew I was prime for the picking, that I was on the complete other coast away from my family. So I was already kind of isolated. And so he's like, come up to the mountain, to the cabin, and come train. We'll do a good fight camp for you, and I'll start booking fights for you, and we'll get this thing rolling. I'm like, all right. And then he's like, I really like you. And next thing I know, I'm dating this guy. And that really snowballed because, 1 minute we'd be training and he'd be punching me. And then the next minute we're getting intimate and he's being extremely violent as well. And those lines really got blurred between a healthy sexual relationship and an abusive relationship. And it was so subtle and so, um, so subtle, so gray that there was no stopping it. You know, this was my first adult relationship, and he would always tell me, oh, this is how adults have relationship in the real world. And so he was labor and sex trafficking me. So he was labor trafficking me by making me fight every weekend and taking the money from the fights. And then he was sex trafficking me as well to everybody around and all the different fight teams and whatnot.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
So how long did that happen for you? How long were you in that situation?
Only 6 months, thank God. And people go, well, how do you get from being with someone to sleeping with other people outside your relationship? Again, it was part of that. My boundaries surrounding being violated sexually were already broken down a long time ago. My self-worth was already completely gone. So when he suggested, oh, it really turns me on when you're hitting on my friend or doing this with this guy, do that for me. Oh, okay. Like, I don't know. So it was a very subtle, very toxic brainwashing experience. And again, he had me up at his cabin. So I was isolated to an nth degree. And his family were telling me stories about, the abuse that happens up there and all this stuff. And basically, if I made the wrong move, they'd kill me. And that was pretty well communicated towards me. So I was trapped in that way. And so it was only about 6 months. And the night I realized what was happening, not to the full of it, but when I realized something was wrong, I was leaving a training session and somebody ran a light and T-boned me and totaled my truck and almost killed me. And I was knocked out and I came to consciousness and I texted my pimp and said, I just got in an accident, I almost died. And he said, is your face effed up? And I said, no. And he goes, well, at least you're still fuckable. And I was like,
Oh my
oh
God.
my God. It was like coming out of water. I was like, what am I doing? Who am I? Like, this isn't who I am. This isn't what I was
Oh,
meant for. Like, what the hell is going on? And I didn't understand it to a degree, but I knew something had to change. And I knew that was a very small window in when that change could happen until I got sucked back in.
wow. 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 So after that happened, then where did you end up going at that point? Like,
I went to well, actually, I had some random dude take me back to an apartment I had. Um, I didn't go to the hospital because I was used to getting brain damage all the time. I was used to concussions all the time. So I was like, oh, yeah, this is how that feels. It's not a big deal. But I had severe brain trauma. I started losing my memory from that point forward. I couldn't figure out how to order pizza. I couldn't finish sentences. So finally, a friend took me to the ER a couple days later. And after that, I tried to commit suicide. And I was actually successful, but he found me and pumped my stomach and brought me back to life. And then I bought a plane ticket and I left the next day and never looked back.
wow.
And I just left. I had an apartment. I had all my stuff there. I had a job that I was working during the day. I was very successful during the day. And I was a completely different person, professional woman during the day. Um, but I was an absolute alcoholic and I was being sex and labor trafficked by night.
You know what? This is such an incredible story because, even for those that are in this group may not have experienced what you experienced, but this double life or
Mhm.
living one way during the day and living another at home, that was me.
Yeah.
Very professional, very well to do, great job, look the part, dress the part, the whole 9 yards. Then I'd come home and I'd, just drink all night or be out on my patio. It was when I was smoking too. I'd go out to my patio and smoke my cigarettes and drink my wine and whatever. So it's really hard when we can't differentiate between those two people. And there's so much energy that goes into keeping that secret
Hmm.
quiet. And this was a really big deal, right? You were violated, you were a victim. So, how does one go? Because I think this is so important too for anybody who has any sort of an addiction or that has suicidal thoughts or that has experienced anxiety and depression. I don't know. Can everybody just raise their hand? Because let's be honest, right? We've all experienced it. It's like the biggest takeaway here is how do we go from this victim mentality of being abused or feeling like that we're hiding the shame and we're stuffing it down to rising up and becoming a survivor? Because I know you talk about this, going from victim to survivor to now advocate. How does that happen? How did you do that process? Because a lot of people will stay stuck, Amanda, and this is
Mhm.
really why this group exists. I'm trying to, reach those people that are in the gray area, that are feeling in that in between. They're like got one foot on one side and the other, and they're living on the edge or on this cliff, and it's like either one way or the other. They could go either way. So it's, how do we get past that? How do we move forward? How did you do
Yeah.
it?
Well, yeah, definitely everybody's journey looks different and journeying through that looks different. How I did it was I acknowledged that something was wrong. Something's messed up. I don't know what it is. I didn't have the language to surround it. I had no idea I was being sex trafficked. I just thought my boyfriend was cheating on me. That's what I thought. And I was like, I'm done with this. And so I knew, I was so aware that I had a moment of clarity and I had to act in that moment and get out. And my initial response wasn't good, right? I was depressed. I tried to commit suicide. I actually was successful at that. And for whatever reason, thank God he brought me back and I was able to buy that plane ticket and escape. But I think it's acknowledging that I'm not okay and that's okay. So what are you going to do about it? Like action. So acknowledgement and action, because like as soon as you acknowledge something's not right, even though I didn't have the clarity around it, action does bring clarity. So I knew if I started moving away from this dysfunctional thing, even though I wasn't exactly sure what that looks like, that would bring clarity the further away I got from it. And maybe I was running, we could say that too, but it was running towards something better. So when I came back to Florida, because I'm from Florida, I flew back to Florida and moved in with my parents, which was humiliating. And I just started consuming everything mental health. Never before had that been something that had been presented to me. I just knew I was messed up and I needed help. So I searched for it in podcasts and books and YouTubes in a group like this. I was in all these groups just trying to figure out what was wrong. And the more I heard people's stories, the more I was like, oh my God, I was being sexually abused. Oh my God, like it's not okay to hit somebody while you're having sex with them. Like that's messed up. Oh my gosh, I was being sex and labor trafficked. Like I got more revelation the more I heard other people's stories. And the more they were honest and vulnerable about where they had been and where they were now. So I think that helped me pull me out of that victimhood into being more of an advocate, like hearing those stories. And then I was going to say something else. I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, that's
I feel like people, it's hard because being that double person, living that double life, being a victim, being someone who always can't find love and gets hurt. We all know those people. Maybe we've all been those people. I have been too, who just seem to have bad luck. But people grow so comfortable with their addictions and with their dysfunction. And it's familiar. It's almost comforting, even though it's hurting you.
Mhm.
And recognizing that it is hurting you, even though it's comfortable, and that you have to choose something, you have to say something, yes to something bigger than that dysfunction.
Yes. Yes. Well, you just said something that's, worth repeating. So recently I had a client, and it was a male client, and he talked about that a lot, about how he felt like a victim, and versus him being this shining light and standing up for what he wanted to do and how he felt about things moving forward. And I think that's really important that we take notice of that, because a lot of times it is so easy for us to stay in this comfortable place because it's familiar. It's just so much easier to come home and drink
Mm-hmm.
instead of dealing with your crap. Right. And we get in this mindset of like, well, it's just what I do. It's too hard for me to try to look at my addictions or my behavior. It's too hard for me to have a toxic relationship. It's too hard for me to change the way that I'm doing things. Like, I just don't want to have to do that. And so
Mhm.
it's like you're remaining a victim.
Mhm.
And there's
Yeah,
a
you're
difference.
perpetuating that cycle.
Yes. And there's such a difference between a victim and being victimized,
Mhm.
and a huge difference. So I talk about that a lot. And I think it's important that the fact when we look back on your situation, you were victimized. You are no
Mhm.
longer a victim, Amanda. You've gotten to the place where you understand what you've gone through as a survivor. And now you're in this awesome place.
Mhm.
So I also want my viewers to know about what you're doing as far as being an advocate for ending human trafficking, because you have done a pretty awesome thing last year. So why don't you share about what you were able to do, because it's pretty amazing.
Sure. So after I started getting some healing and I felt like I was in a place that I had something to give back, I started working for an anti-sex trafficking organization. And so I've been to Myanmar, Bangkok, Tijuana, uh, all doing undercover anti-sex trafficking work and rescuing mainly children in those places. And then I came back to Florida and worked undercover doing anti-sex trafficking work, getting adults and children out of sex trafficking. And through that, that kind of developed into me being an expert, obviously, on sex trafficking. So I have about 8 years total of social work and anti-sex trafficking work. And I had an opportunity where I got before my congressman and he asked me, hey, like, you're an expert in this area. Like, where are the gaps? What are we missing? How do we combat this thing? And together we ended up writing some legislation that released funding to educate first responders on the signs of trafficking, because usually first responders are the first point of contact for victims, and how so they could see the signs and understand how to do that. And then that developed into me training all of our local police officers, every single new recruit that would come through, on sex trafficking. We reduced sex trafficking by 67% in my area, which is huge.
Wow.
And then I was also able to counsel New Zealand government on their legislation surrounding prostitution and sex trafficking.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing work. Well, thank you so much for doing that. That's really
Yeah.
awesome. This is a really good segue to mention briefly. I recently, as in yesterday, learned about an organization called Safe House Project. I'll put the link below. They are offering a free, it's about an hour training. There's 10 modules. They're all about a couple minutes a piece. This training, you guys, is so good. Rob and I started doing it last night, and I thought I knew a decent amount about how victims are sucked in. And I'm telling you, I guarantee there is somebody that you know right
Oh yeah.
now, right now, that you would never expect is is either being the predator, hmm, or they're actually being the victim.
Mhm.
And one of the things that really caught my attention, because I remember as a 12 to 15-year-old, I was in that mindset of like, I needed the attention from guys to feel like I was accepted and loved. And, during that time, I was like, I was a bad person and it was my fault.
Mm.
And what was happening was that they were preying on me. And so this happens, I mean,
Yeah.
your own daughters or your own sons. This isn't just for females, this is for boys too. That if let's say your daughter is dressing kind of sexy and posing and putting on, I mean, with Instagram and TikTok and all, Facebook, whatever, social platforms, it may look like they're just doing what kids do, but I'm telling you, they become easy targets for those predators that end up sexting with them, and they send nude photos. And the next thing
Mhm.
you know, then they're being, it's called sextortion, which I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know there was a thing. They actually threaten the child to
Yeah.
either, kill them or share their photos elsewhere. And this is what happens with child pornography. And this is how this whole thing happens. So don't think this is just like, oh, it only happens overseas or in Africa.
Nope.
It's happening in your neighborhoods. It's happening all around us. And it's just something that's so near and dear to my heart. So I will put
Mhm.
that link below. And also, there's another organization in Richmond that is going to go bigger national. It's the Richmond Justice League. And I will be a sponsor for their big fundraising event next year in April 2021. So I'm excited to be a part of sponsoring that organization, but also I will be helping out Safe House Project, which is the other one. Safe House Project I love because they actually rehabilitate those kids. They find safe homes for them, whether it's foster. They have tons of medical care and teams. So I think that's really important. But the biggest takeaway, Amanda, is for me and for everybody in this group, and why I spent a whole week dedicating to this theme about sharing your story, is that whenever we keep this trauma and your secrets quiet, it festers. It becomes more of a problem. And we don't realize it. If you think about a pressure cooker, the pressure builds and builds and builds, and finally it explodes. And this is when we have depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and attempts. It becomes a huge thing. This is why addictions occur. This is why we want to escape and numb. We don't want to deal with reality. It's just so much easier to just not deal with it. Sharing your story with another human being, even if it's just one person. I'm not suggesting you do what me and Amanda are doing and telling the whole world. I'm suggesting tell one person and start to release some of that. Because once you do, that's when you can start to move forward. And if it's something serious with some deep trauma, this is when healing can begin. So I urge you to consider that. I know it's hard, but consider it. What do you think about that, Amanda? Do you agree?
I definitely agree. I would definitely, if you've experienced something very traumatizing, to definitely have someone trusted. But once you get some therapy around that, you'll find that you're able to share a little bit more. So if I would have shared my story right up front, I would have re-traumatized myself. You know, I would have had nightmares again. I would have had panic attacks. So go at your own pace and honor the season you're in, and honor where you're at with your own story. But to let that wound breathe and get some oxygen to it is the best thing you can do for it, to let it start healing, exactly like you said.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Amanda, where I want people to be able to follow you on Instagram, which I did put the handle in here, but this is going to go on YouTube. So why don't you share your handle, and more importantly, what you're up to now? Because you are an author. You've done a journal, which I know about. You can talk a little bit about that. And what is a book that you're currently writing? Because I know it's like super cool.
Well,
and it's not self-help, y'all.
it is not self-help. I wrote a horror novel, which I don't like horror. But a lot of survivors I've worked with find horror to be a really healing thing, because it's kind of normalizing horrific things for them. So when they see somebody else in a story being told about someone being hurt, they can relate to that, and it kind of gets them to a place to where they can too and find healing. So that was always super interesting to me. So I paired up with a buddy of mine and I wrote this horror novel, and it's called Down the Road. The ebook is actually for sale for 99 cents right now, and the official launch of the paperback is November 1st. So that's right around the corner. I'm super excited about it. My mom said it was great, so
Oh, that's
so
good.
that means it's true, right?
Yes, yes, that's good.
Now,
We'll make sure we put the link down there so people can get it.
yeah. So now you can find me on Instagram at Amanda Cat, all together, just like it sounds, no special, nothing, just Amanda Cat. And if you want to talk about any of this stuff, feel free to DM me. That's not a problem. Just mention you saw me with Carrie. So I'm not like, who's this, you know? And now I'm a writer. So I help people tell their story. I help people speak their truth in their message, whether that's surrounding their business and their brand or their social media, or whether it's through a book. I'm more than happy to help. And I'm partnering with our congressman again to write some new legislation protecting kids in foster care, because he has a huge heart for foster care as well. So just writing all the things, all the things.
All the things. Oh my gosh, Amanda, you're such a beautiful human being. So grateful to have you on. I'm more grateful that we're friends. We've gotten to know each other really well over the past several months, and I love you. I just think you're an amazing person. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for coming on and sharing with my group. And I know you're in the group too, so thank you for
Yeah,
being here with us. And
totally, my pleasure.
thanks guys for watching. And like I said, if you want to follow Amanda, please do. Or if you have any questions, we'll catch them after the replay. I've been sort of watching, but we'll catch it on the replay, and we'll talk to y'all soon.